This is week Viva 1 on the factions of Judaism and where they originally came from. So, although many people think Judaism is just one religion where everyone is combined and together, it is really split up into 3 different factions, and these all came from the the Babylonian captivity. And there were 3 factions that came from it, which were the Pharisees, Sadducees, and Essenes. And so first was the Pharisees. And now to figure out where they came from, you have to go back to where it started, which is the Babylonian captivity. And you need to have the history of it. So, King Akkad attacked the city of Judah in 598 BC. He gathered his armies in that year and went and attacked the Hittite land where the kingdom of Judah was located. And he camped by it and conquered it, and he captured the city, replaced the king, and destroyed the temple, and took much treasure back with him. And now, this wasn't just gold and silver, although it did include that stuff. It was also the men of the cities. And so, he didn't take just any man from off the street. He took, they were from the royal family, young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, and qualified to serve in the king's palace, unquote. That is said in Daniel 1:1-5. And so what was left in Judah was the not so bright or handsome men, and also their temple was demolished, like I said before. And so this left the kingdom in Judah in a real predicament, since the Jewish culture was very temple-based, and having no temple meant that you could no longer have sacrifices or cleansing rituals or worship to God. And so that made a huge problem with the Jewish people. And so they had to learn that they could live without a temple. And so they switched from a temple religion to a book religion, allowing them to meet wherever they could. They usually met in the public houses. And they were taught by these rabbis, which means teacher. And this is where the Pharisees come from. They came around because they had to teach the people how not to sin, to prevent them from having to have multiple sacrifices to save them from their sins. And they were also from the lower class, so it was also a split between the upper class and the lower class, because all the lower class was left in the city. And so that is where the Pharisees originated, from the lower class, like I said, and because they needed teachers, the people needed teachers to have them teach the Bible. And so the second people group I'm going to be talking about is the Sadducees. And so to learn their origin, you also have to go back to the capture. And like I said before, the king had taken all the handsome young men and had captured them and had taught them in the kingdom of Babylon. And so then after 60 years of captivity, they returned in 538 BC, when the Persian conqueror Cyrus the Great attacked Babylon and let the Jewish people go back to their homeland. And however, many of the Israelites returned to the country they did not know, since it had changed so much, having to adapt to a non-temple culture. And so when the returnees came back, they were expected to get their same jobs that they historically had. So that was mainly like priesthood. And so they wanted to be priests again. And so they, got those eventually. And so they were more of the upper class. And, but then the Jewish people did not the Jewish people did not trust these returnees. They thought they were spies from the Persian emperor sent to figure out what was happening in the kingdom of Judah. Which they were kind of changed because they were taught more of the Babylonian ways. And so that was slightly true. And so then the Sadducees, the Sadducees emerged as a religious faction from the upper class society, and they were probably descended from those Jews who had lived in exile. And so they didn't start off exactly as Sadducees. They became them later in life, or in the years of Judaism. And they were also very active in political life, which is different than the Pharisees. And had a heavy influence on temple life, since they were more of the temple priests than the Pharisees. And so then the third group of factions is the Essenians. And so these people originated from, they also go back to when the Babylonian captivity, but it was a little bit later that they came around. And so it all started because you have to listen to the story of Nehemiah the cupbearer. And so Nehemiah was, like I said, the cupbearer, but for the Persian king Artaxerxes. And the news got to Nehemiah eventually that Jerusalem's walls had been destroyed, and the temple was also destroyed as well. And he was sad, and so the king noticed this in Nehemiah and told him to go back and repair the walls and the temple, which he did, and also started the Second Temple Judaism. And so this is where the Essenians came from. They probably came from a sect of people that came from the priests. Yeah. And so there wasn't a whole lot of information. No. Excuse me. And to tell you about their life, it was very different than the Sadducees and Pharisees. And so the Essenians lived in various cities, but in congregated communal life, dedicated to severe discipline and voluntary poverty and daily immersion. So immersion is kind of an earlier form of baptism. And so, like I said, although many people think Judaism was just one unified religion, it really kind of became four religions with the Babylonian captivity, and they split into the Pharisees, Sadducees, and Essenians. Thank you.